It's time to kick ass and chew bubble gum. And I'm all out of gum.
Come quietly or there will be trouble.
Come get some. Hadouken!
Prove me wrong. That'd be great.
Hello, welcome back to A Boring Revolution, your number one news source for everything in regards to the Boring Company. I hope you are well. So, a little bit late on this one. Sorry about that. I have had a few things to do recently and I wasn't able to jump on it straight away. But there has been this incredible FUD article about the Boring Company in Las Vegas, alleging that they have caused some workers on site some very, very serious injuries, and concluding that overall the company doesn't care about safety and all they care about is cutting costs and rushing things. And the whole article is a humongous piece of FUD, and also makes some very strange assumptions. What's even better than the article is the actual podcast that kind of follows up on this article by these two people here, Max and Sarah. And I thought I'd just go through the article and kind of just give my opinion on things and trying to explain why I think what's occurred has occurred and how we would go about, in my opinion, as a former construction manager / project manager, how we would go about eliminating this risk and preventing further incidents. So there are two articles. There's this one here on Bloomberg, which I'll send the link. It's behind a paywall, but there are ways to get around that. There's also this article in Business Insider, which is basically just a copy of the entire article. But basically, so let's go through this. So, the Boring Company's tiny Las Vegas loop is all that's come of Musk's promise to build super-fast mass transit hyperloops. So, straight away, we're walking into bullshit, because the Boring Company at no point has ever produced any plans for a hyperloop, and the Boring Company itself on the X site has never posted anything about building a hyperloop. There's no way that's what's been proposed. If you look at the projects that the Boring Company has actually proposed and has intended to start on, there were no hyperloops. So to immediately pull that out is very disingenuous. Workers say its tunnels are packed with chemical sludge. Again, it's hard to say. It's very, very hard to say, but I'll come to that in a minute. The muck pooling in the tunnel at the north end of the Las Vegas Strip had the consistency of milkshake and in some places sat at least 2 feet deep. Now, absolutely 100% sure that is BS, because there's no way that segments could be moved through the tunnel for assembly at the other end if there was 2 feet of muck, sludge, whatever you want to call it. The tunnel to be would eventually stretch for about half a mile, was part of a system intended to connect two hotels, the Encore and the Westgate, with the enormous Las Vegas Convention Center. Workers doing the digging later said they had to wade through mud every day. It splashed up over their boots, hit their arms and face, soaked through their clothes. Now, why would it soak through their clothes? These people are working underground in an incredibly confined space. Why would you be wearing clothes that are not at least partially waterproof? That for me is shocking. At first it merely felt damp, but in addition to the water, sand and silt, the natural byproducts of any dig, the workers understood that it was full of chemicals known as accelerants. The accelerants cure the grout that seals the tunnel's concrete support, helping the grout set properly and protecting the work against cracks and other deterioration. So let's just talk about this in a little bit more detail. So let me just pull up an image. So this is kind of a cross section of a tunnel. As you can see, the tunnel lining. In fact, let me pull out my my pointy hand. As you can see, this is the tunnel lining here. It typically ranges from around 200 millimeters thick to over 340 millimeters thick, about 14-15 inches. This grey area here is grout. In fact, let me pull up an even better picture just to illustrate this. So as you can see here, the grout, this is the segment. This is the segment here that I'm pointing to. This is the concrete segment. When you install that concrete segment, yeah, you have the edge of the concrete segment, and then you have the edge of the opening that you've bored through, and then you have a gap. Now typically, that gap is anywhere from 3 millimeters all the way up to potentially 40 millimeters at extreme levels. If you just left that gap there, you would have settlement at the surface. You may have uneven loading of the segments. So what you do is you fill it, and you fill it with grout, which is a mixture of cement and sand and water and some additives, and we'll come to those additives in a minute. You have these injection holes. You have injection holes every meter or so in each segment, and then you inject it at very, very high pressures, 100 psi, maybe much more, and it goes in behind the segments, it fills in all the gaps, and then you pull out your injector and then move it to the next stage. Now, what I suspect has happened is that as they have been injecting this grout in behind the concrete segments, when they've pulled out that injector, grout has come out the other end and it's landed on the invert of the tunnel, so the bottom of the tunnel, and then you have another problem, and I'll come to that here. So as you can see on this image here, we have our conveyor belt. This is our conveyor belt here. So our conveyor belt is moving all the spoil from the excavation chamber via the screw conveyor to the back of the machine where it can be disposed of, and as you can see, it's got quite a flat profile. Now, a lot of this spoil that you're removing from the machine is very, very wet, and this leads me to a problem. And the problem is that as this spoil is moving along the conveyor belt, small amounts, probably less than 2 to 3% of it, are falling out, water's dripping down the sides, and then you end up with this, which is just water pooling on the floor. It doesn't look like sludge on these images, but however, this might just be at the front of the machine. But it's mostly water, lots and lots of soil and rocks and things like that down here. But that then mixes with everything that comes off the machine. So if we have a look at a machine, here we go. So as you imagine, all this material is coming out of the screw conveyor, and it goes into the conveyor belt, and then it falls on the floor. Then you have grease from the bearing that also makes its way. You have kind of a wax or a grease that sits in between the shield and the concrete segments. That also can make its way in. Then you have the grout that you've injected that as you're pulling it out, it leaks. And maybe someone left it on and more leaked out. And in addition to that, in here, the excavation chamber, you have a mixture of all your spoil, and sometimes you inject a foam or a soil conditioner, which there are so many different varieties, it's difficult to say what exactly is in that foam or that soil conditioner. And that then gets mixed in with the spoil, so you have another chemical. So you have lubricants, you have greases, you have this soil conditioner, you have the grout. Now, the grout contains an additive. So the grout is cement and water and sand and then this additive. Now, allegedly from this article, it is saying that this additive, now, or an accelerant, as they call it, that helps the cement mixture, the mortar, the grout, cure much more quickly. So instead of curing over an 8-hour period, it cures over a 2-hour period or a 1-hour period. And the allegation is that this is causing burns. At the Encore dig site, such burns became almost routine. Workers there told Nevada's Occupational Safety and Health Administration an investigation by the state OSHA has obtained via Freedom of Information requests. At least one employee took a direct hit to the face. So that's not good. But this shouldn't matter anyway, because this is an easily fixable problem. And I suspect this is a problem that has been caused by operatives in the TBM, rather than people setting standards that are too low. In an interview with Business Week, one of the tunnel workers recalls the feeling of exposure to the chemicals. You'd be like, why am I on fire? So as you can see, it's got the consistency of a very wet milkshake. And here you have some spoil that's kind of built up here. Just there. So, the Boring Company has a problem. The problem is that you've given people the opportunity to sue you. And bearing in mind this video is going to be quite a long video, guys, but please stick with me. This is a maintenance problem, and this should be cleared at least every 3 days, if not more often. Yeah, it should be pumped out. Now, unfortunately, some parts of the tunnel are lower than other parts, and then you get accumulations. But really, there's an opportunity here for pumping this out and removing this. But even in the event that you do have this pooling here, this should not cause burns and things like that. They suggest that the burns come from the accelerant, from the additive in the grout. I actually don't think that is the case. I think these are just bog standard cement burns, concrete burns. But I could be wrong. I obviously need further information in regards to what's in here. But when you are on site, you must be wearing the full PPE, personal protective equipment. I have a funny feeling that we've got guys going underground here, going down wearing PPE and then removing PPE in the tunnels because of the extremely hot conditions. And even this here would not be suitable. What the Boring Company needs to do is it needs to standardise what PPE people wear when they are in the tunnel underground and near the TBM. So first of all, you would have all these overalls. These overalls would be waterproof. I repeat, waterproof. And before someone points out, yes, this person is not wearing gloves, I agree. They should be wearing gloves at all times and safety goggles. In fact, here you go. Here are some safety goggles. Now, they should be wearing this. You could make an argument that they should be wearing maybe a full face covering as well. But when you're underground in these kind of mining conditions, and if you've ever seen miners, especially on sites where it's extremely deep underground, you will have full PPE. Now, just before I go through the podcast, I want to show you something. These are the two people that wrote this FUD article. Now, these are allegations. People have made allegations that they've been injured on Boring Company sites. Now, we don't know if these 15 incidents are 15 people or one person burning themselves 15 times because, they've made issues here. It doesn't actually say. Another thing that they quote as well is this incident here where a spoil yard here collapsed. This was overloaded. But given some of the things I've seen on building sites, that's a fairly minor issue. But let's listen to the podcast and see what can be said about this.
Half the satellites in space are owned and controlled by one man.
Well, he's a legitimate super genius. I mean, legitimate.
He says he's always voted for Democrats, but this year it will be different.
So just to clarify, this is a podcast called Elon Inc. that is done by Bloomberg. I personally have been listening to this for about 4 months, I believe. In general, it is a very, very negative podcast. For the majority of the time, like, you know, I'd say like 1 in 10 things they say are positive, the other 9, 10 are negative. So you read into that what you will. Bloomberg doesn't like Elon Musk, and Elon Musk doesn't like Bloomberg. But yeah, the 2 people that are on this podcast are Max Chafkin and Sarah McBride, the same people that wrote this very article. And their lack of knowledge when it comes to the Boring Company and just how the Boring Company does things is absolutely shocking, and in a lot of ways is actually quite funny. But I'll explain.
Republican.
There is a reason the U.S. government is so reliant on him.
Elon Musk is a scam artist, and he's done nothing.
Anything he does is fascinating.
Yeah.
He's done nothing, absolutely nothing. Just put the largest rocket in space today, yeah? He's built the largest electric vehicle company. You know, all these things. He's done nothing. Absolutely nothing. He's done literally the impossible with SpaceX and Tesla. And these guys are saying he's absolutely done nothing. But hey, you just got to laugh. You know, he must be saying that because he knows that he winds people up. That's the only way, because he's not using his reasoning skills to come to that conclusion.
Oh.
Welcome to Elon Inc., Bloomberg's weekly podcast about Elon Musk. It's February 27, 2024. I'm your host, David Papadopoulos. The Boring Company is Elon's mass transit gambit. According to Musk, it's supposed to take us from New York City to Washington, D.C. in just 30 minutes.
See, first of all, why is that the example that they've brought up when it's a project that is, 5 years ago? We've had so many other different projects proposed since then using the current system that the Boring Company has kind of focused on, which is essentially cars in tunnels driven autonomously at reasonably high speeds, and you have lots of ramps, and it's more like an Uber except that you use private roads underground. So I've no idea why they would use that example unless they were trying to paint a negative kind of sentiment against Elon Musk. It's just a stupid example to use. And, Elon Musk has not been talking about the Hyperloop and the Boring Company very much, if not at all. 99% of the time he's not talking about that. So here's kind of something he said in 2019. Let's have a look at what he's saying here. So what's that there? What's that speed? And he's not talking about the Hyperloop. So I don't know where this thing comes from.
With a high-speed underground transportation system. So a fast train, more or less. But a new piece from Bloomberg Businessweek tells a story of scarring chemical burns, broken promises, and little progress beyond a glorified shuttle bus system built for the Las Vegas Convention Center. We'll talk about that today, but we also have...
So, what a ridiculous thing, a glorified shuttle bus system. So what is a train? Is a train a glorified fucking bus? What? The language used is stupid.
Better news for Elon. The Cybertruck is good. Hannah Elliott will join us to talk about
But they spent the last 3 years slating it. Suddenly now it's good. Wow.
her review of Elon's hotly debated futuristic pickup. We start with boring, though, and to do that, I am joined here in the studio by Max Chafkin, Bloomberg Business Week reporter. Hello, Max.
Hey.
And we're joined by Sarah McBride, who covers startups for us here at Bloomberg, including Neuralink, Elon Musk's Neuralink, and the Boring Company. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi.
Okay, Sarah, so let's dig in. We've never on this show talked about the Boring Company. We talk about all his companies.
So the first thing you're going to realise with this Sarah McBride is that she's absolutely clueless. And it's almost funny if it wasn't just, scary to think that this woman's writing articles about various companies and then people are taking that information and then using it as a tool to pick investments.
He's every week, all the time, but it's never come up yet until now. So tell our readers a little bit about what the company does and what the ultimate goal here is.
Yeah, the Boring Company's under the radar compared to other Musk companies. Its goal was to connect cities using underground passages where people would travel at extremely high speeds, like riding in a train, but going at the speed of an airplane in near vacuum conditions.
Wrong. Absolute rubbish. Not true. Not true. The Boring Company has been very, very consistent on all the recent projects, on the LA project, on the Chicago project, on the projects in Florida, in Las Vegas. All these projects have proposed the same thing, which is cars in tunnels driven autonomously once regulations allow it. That there has never ever been a plan produced for a Hyperloop. The Boring Company has no technology developed for the Hyperloop. There is only some interest in doing research on using tunnels for Hyperloop, but no concrete proposals, plans or investments for building the physical Hyperloop system, maglev type system. So that is just a stupid introduction. Stupid.
And over time, that goal has been scaled down. And now the project that the Boring Company...
It never started with the Hyperloop. There was never... When the Boring Company first came around, the proposal was for 125 mile per hour cars on skates. That was the initial... So I have no idea why she's doing that. She's obviously not done her research.
It's working on is in Las Vegas, and it's to take people to different points under the city of Las Vegas. And what they've done is dug a tunnel under the convention center. A lot of people would say it's really no problem to walk from one side to the other of the convention center, but it is several.
So that's not the overall plan for the Las Vegas loop. The overall plan is to connect everywhere to anywhere using these tunnel systems. So she's totally underplaying the overall grand ambitions of that particular project. Again, she didn't mention how many miles of tunnel there were there, how many different stations there were, how many passengers they were going to move per hour. No mention of that, no specifics. She's very, very low on detail.
Buildings, and so there's a tunnel that's about a mile long in each direction. And they've
built lots more than a mile. We're coming up to nearly 4 miles of tunnel now. She has no idea. Again, wrong.
Recently run into a lot of problems that we wouldn't know about, except there were a bunch of worker safety OSHA complaints filed, and that shed some light onto the speed at which Boring's trying to build out this system.
Max, tell us a little bit about what those complaints showed.
So, yeah, the complaint...
So this guy's slightly less dumb than, her colleague, but he's not great.
They span a bunch of different issues related to workplace conditions underground. And by the way, we tried to get the Boring Company's perspective. They did not respond to our request for comment, but they have denied the substance of these allegations to government regulators. They basically said, you haven't proven any of this happened. We're going to deny this all. So that's kind of where things stand. Some of them are...
So one of the things that you could argue is that if you, the Boring Company, instruct people to do things in a certain way, for example, wear certain amounts of PPE, personal protective equipment, and to operate in a certain method, and then people go into the tunnel and start ignoring those instructions, it's on them if they then injure themselves. Now, we don't have enough details because this article doesn't really go into detail exactly how. In fact, it kind of insinuates that people just stood in it and got burned, but that just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. But hey, you know, this is Bloomberg.
Sounds so bad it's almost funny. So a few things. There is sort of this like toxic water that's like at the bottom of some of these tunnels, and that workers have to wade through. They're getting these terrible chemical burns, according to the workers. So the main problem in tunneling.
It should never ever happen. If you are wearing the correct PPE on site, these kind of injuries should never ever happen. And I respect the fact that it's extremely warm in those tunnels and it's uncomfortable, but you've got to wear your PPE at all times. And if you don't follow the instructions and you remove articles of PPE, then that unfortunately is on you.
This is kind of a weird thing, a weird world for like one of our biggest brainiacs and, you know, most successful doers to do. But the big problem in tunneling is muck. That's the technical term for the stuff that you're trying to move out of the tunnel to you know, make room for the air. And they were just drastically overloading these bins of muck.
No. So this is it's like he doesn't understand what's going on in the tunnel. So the muck is removed via a conveyor belt system. There are no bins in the tunnel. Completely wrong. So he's getting confused with an accident that happened at the surface where no one was injured. So it wasn't even an accident, it was an incident, which is this. So as you can see here, the frigging wall collapsed. It collapsed. Now, yes, it was overloaded, but really that was caused by them not removing material fast enough. So again, not correct.
And one of the muck bins exploded.
It's not a muck bin. This is a spoil storage yard, and it's contained behind these retaining walls. So it's not a bin. Absolutely the wrong term. It's not a skip. It's not a bin. It's a muck storage yard.
Then you have these like 2-ton concrete bricks, like 15 of them flying everywhere.
Absolutely impossible. So we can actually see what's happened to these bricks, and they've just toppled over, probably at 1 mile an hour. Nothing's flown away or flown towards someone. So this is a drastic over-exaggeration here.
Hit an intern. Now we should say, look, tunneling is...
Things like this happen on building sites all over America and the world all day long, but suddenly, because it's the Boring Company, this is a huge travesty, and we need to stop work immediately and not do other things. It's just wow. Unfortunately, construction, mining, assembling things is dangerous, and things like this happen. You learn lessons and then you move on.
Mining is a dangerous business. And the chemicals...
And this is, in many ways, is sort of similar to mining.
This is mining, in fact. And that's where a lot of the workers are coming from. I mean, it is mining. They're digging in the ground. But what I'll say is the big promise here from Elon Musk was not that I'm going to mine. It was that I'm going to come up with new and innovative ways to do mining much more efficiently, much faster, much better, at a much lower cost. Like that.
And he did. They absolutely did. So they totally standardized the entire tunnel boring machine, Proof Rock. They built all the components in-house now. So they have a machine that can mine and excavate at the same time and assemble precast concrete segments. By standardizing everything from the size of the TBM to the cutter discs to the bearing to the screw conveyor, everything standardized, that drastically reduces cost. By introducing this innovative conveyor belt system where it's sat on a rack and you can extend it and retract it, and you can move muck out of the system at 6-7 miles an hour. That drastically reduces costs and improves speed. And improved power, 3 times more power than a TBM of the equivalent size. All these things are innovation. This is an incredibly advanced tunnel boring machine, and this guy is making it out as though it's just something that's pulled out of a part bin, which it absolutely isn't.
That was the original pitch. And instead, and that's what, and why this story is important, is what you actually see and what workers we spoke to are saying is that the Boring Company is basically, in most ways, like a normal tunneling venture. It's just cutting like a lot of corners as they see it. And so instead of coming up with obviously...
What corners? What corners are being cut? Be more specific.
Innovative ways to dig tunnels, what they seem to have done, at least by some accounts, is just sort of put workers at risk. And
sort of. Not very specific language.
Force them to work much harder, much longer, and under...
So, if you work in a TBM, you're going to be working long hours. It doesn't matter if you're in Germany, or in India, or in Africa, or you're digging a tunnel in Brazil. You know, that's the nature of civil engineering. So I don't know why he's making out as though it's only the Boring Company that works people long hours.
These, exceedingly difficult conditions that frankly, I don't think many would have accepted if it weren't for the fact that they were like, oh, we're working for this, Elon Musk company. The same reason a lot of people work for him.
So, Sarah, there's nothing special about the Boring Company's drilling rigs, just sort of run-of-the-mill mining rigs.
So this is the funniest bit of the podcast, I'm not going to lie. I've had to go through this at least 4 times, and it just blows my mind.
In ways, they're worse than regular mining rigs because most...
How? How are they worse? Explain.
Mining rigs from big established companies have a lot of safety features built in.
They have a lot of safety features built in. Please elaborate on all these amazing safety features that are built into the TBM. Please. Does it regard the assembly of the concrete segments? Is it something to do with how the screw conveyor pulls the spoil out of the excavation chamber? Is it to do with how, maybe it's to do with how grout is injected into the wall? Is it something been removed from that? Maybe they only do it with 1 person instead of 7. Please tell us, because you've made quite a broad statement there, and we're very interested to learn more about these incredible things
that we heard that the Boring Company's rigs lack. Let me paint a picture for you.
No explanation. So these critical safety systems that she's trying to insinuate that have been removed, no idea what she's talking about. I've had to think about it for at least 2 days, and I have no idea. I have no idea what she means. What are we talking about here? There's no specifics, why is it not even? It's not even in the article. It's just a massive assumption based on zero knowledge, having never ever been in a tunnel or even watched a video of a tunnel boring machine. I don't no idea what she means. I've been thinking about it all day. So it's actually safer because the Boring Company uses conveyor belts to remove the spoil rather than actual trains that potentially could collide with people, or things could, tip over. It's madness.
What it was like to be working in one of these tunnels. So last summer was regularly 120 degrees in Vegas.
It's always hot in tunnels. It always has been, it always will be. And, as an operator in a tunnel, you just get used to it. Ask anyone who's worked in this industry, and they'll tell you exactly the same thing. After a month, you get used to it. You're used to swapping your clothes and just living with the conditions that you've got to put up with.
Think underground it would be cooler. No, it wasn't. They tried to cool it down in there. It didn't work very well. You go to your job site, you might have to wade through toxic mud and muck. Also, you'd have to duck muck. So, this toxic mud. Now, theoretically, maybe there's some stuff in this mud, this kind of milkshake that they describe, that's at the invert of the tunnel. And yes, probably the Boring Company should be doing more maintenance to ensure that is removed in good time. However,
I suspect that there's a lot of guidance in regards to PPE, and that should be worn at all times and shouldn't be removed. And I'm very, very confident that if everyone was wearing the correct PPE all the time, the number of burns, chemical burns, would be 0. So that's unfortunately how it is.
That might be dropping on you from the conveyor belts running overhead. Then when you got into the tunnel, you ran the risk of heat exhaustion in some of the tunnel.
So just in regards to spoil falling off the conveyor belt system, yes, it does happen, but at least 99% of that spoil is making it to the other end. It's inevitable that sometimes that will happen, but again, this is a maintenance thing. I mean, that's one criticism we could give to the Boring companies, that they could just eliminate this problem by doing more maintenance. But obviously, it does slow things down when they do that, and the risks are fairly low if you wear the correct PPE.
You were not allowed out. These were 12 hours.
I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, do you actually think that when you need the toilet, they're just going to say, you know what, Dave? You just walk up to the surface half a mile. Take your time, have 15 minutes while you sit on the toilet, and then make yourself a brew and then come back. All right, Dave, you'll be absolutely fine. It's not like we're wicking our arse off down here to assemble these concrete segments and bore this tunnel. This is how it is in the tunneling industry. It's never ever been any different. It's the same 150 years ago as it is now.
They ran 24 hours. There was always somebody in the tunnel. You couldn't leave to go to the bathroom. You'd have to get permission. When you did leave, then you might have other incidents in the pit outside. That's where the exploding muck bin was.
It was not an explosion. It was a partial collapse. And honestly, it wasn't even that dangerous. It was definitely classified as a near miss. And if I was on site and I was running that site, I would be quite upset about it. But it wasn't some kind of super explosion that nearly killed 50 people.
There was somebody who was driving a forklift with faulty brakes that fell over. That person was thrown from the forklift. People were getting chemical burns. In one 30-day period, 10 to 15 people got chemical burns. That's not routine. That is really bad. That's very drastic.
It is our sense that the scale of these injuries and the nature of the things that were happening there on this mining job.
They're not very specific. Now, it could be that you got a chemical burn to your wrist, yeah? And that chemical burn was quite small, and then you reported it. So then you've got 15 people with very small burns on the wrist. It's not very, very specific. They need to really outline the size of the burn. It's not good. For me, it's not enough.
Are worse and more severe.
It could be one person. It could be one person who got burned 15 times. We have no idea because they've not given us the names of the people. The level of information is very, very minimal.
Extreme than you'd see in a typical mining site.
Yes, because mining is dangerous.
No shit. Mining is dangerous. But at least you said one thing during this podcast that actually made sense.
Companies have a lot of protocols in place. It just seems like Boring cut a lot of corners. So where...
It seems like Boring cut a lot of corners. So, no. What corners? What corners were cut? It's just...
On a normal mining site, a chemical burn would be an anomaly. It seemed very routine there.
No, what do you mean? It's just everyone's getting burned every single day? It was... What's probably happened is you had a week of just terrible things happening where a few people got some minor burns and some other people got some, slightly more major burns, and then someone stepped in, changed things, and then they moved on, and then it stopped. It might have been that it was just some bad maintenance for a few weeks, and that's why we got this build-up of sludge at the bottom of the tunnel. It might be that they resolved that. We don't know, but it's not the best. But I will say that health and safety is important, and that really we should try and make sure these things don't happen.
For all the parents out there, picture that it's bedtime. You and the kids have been busy all day. You know they're tired, but with all
Sorry about this.
The Boring Company was dancing with mayors and governors across the country, or actually apparently maybe even striking deals across the country.
Yeah.
Is any of that true?
Yeah. I think it was all true-ish. Okay. So Boring Company in a lot of ways is kind of a prototype for some of Elon Musk's, more recent exploits. So just like the Twitter acquisition, sort of funny tweet turns into a real thing. Boring Company is founded by Elon Musk. He's like in traffic. He types in his phone.
So it's just a dramatic simplification of what actually happened. But what we're going to do is, because this has gone on for too long, I'm going to finish it on that point. But basically, to kind of summarise, this entire article is mountains of assumptions, over-exaggeration of several things that have happened, and probably some people looking to make a quick buck who've worked on the site and got partial burn. And these things would not happen if you had a really, really dedicated maintenance team that were keeping that tunnel clear, and also if you had someone on site who was very rigorously making sure that people were wearing PPE, not just when they went into the tunnel, but during their time working in the tunnel. And if you had those two things, or even just one of those things, then this article would never have been written, and you wouldn't have all this kind of FUD crap that's circulating around. But I'm not worried about it. I see lots of solutions. It's just an over-exaggeration. No one's losing their eyesight because some magic sludge splashed in the face. It just didn't happen. Okay, guys, hope you enjoyed that long video. If you made it to the end, then you deserve a medal. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Goodbye.
You got to take big chances in order for the potential for a big positive outcome.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.